Hey, you. Welcome to another episode of WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. Before we get started today, I do want to give a quick special thank you to our friends at Patriot Depot for sponsoring today's show. You can check out patriotdepot.com, where you can find supplies for the conservative revolution. And if you visit Patriot Depot, make sure you use the promo code WJ Live for 20% off your entire order. Go and check it out. There's some really fun stuff there. I've gotten many family Christmas and birthday gifts off Patriot Depot. Highly recommend. So with that special thanks, my name is Brian Chai. I am the Deputy Managing Editor here at Western Journal. To my left, Mike Lawston, staff reporter. And to my right, Joey Chester, a assignment editor here at the Western Journal. We've got a smorgasbord of topics to get to. We've got everything from critical race theory and whether leftism is becoming its own religion. We've got a potential, audit that could have swung the 2020 election. This is big news, guys. And then I am also going to be talking about the biggest benefactor of the 2020 election, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., who is, let's say, the American people are not super thrilled with him, but we will get to that shortly. First, Joey, tell us about the 2020 election that could have been.
Yeah, folks, we are turning to Montana today, which is my home state, to take a look at the 2020 election. Montana decided to hold a all mail-in ballot election because of the coronavirus pandemic, like many states did, and what led to a disastrous general election in
to say the least.
November.
Yeah.
It feels like it's still going on. But now we're starting to see some of the results from audits and different things that have been done post-election. And, anytime conservatives mention fraud, the Democrats have said, hey, you're you're wrong. There was no fraud in the 2020 election. And we've been called liars and cheaters and conspiracy theorists and all this stuff. And I don't prescribe to the idea that there were voting machines that were changing votes and some of the far out there stuff, some of the Q stuff.
Right.
The thing that I have always found the most alarming in all of this is the idea of universal mail-in ballots. Just mailing a bunch of ballots out to people and having no form of voter ID.
Unsolicited.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened in Montana. And a representative of Montana, Representative Brad Cheetah, a friend of mine, he pushed for an audit of the 2020 general election in Missoula County, Montana. Missoula is one of the hubs of Democrats in Montana. It's a county of about 120,000 people. And there were some alarming things that went on there that this audit exposed. There were 72,000 mail-in ballots cast in the 2020 election in Missoula.
And just to clarify, so Missoula's... Montana went red.
Yes,
right?
Montana went red.
So Missoula's kind of like a blue bastion within the state.
Missoula is like the hub of liberalism in Montana. It's where all the hippies and different weirdos live.
Some skater boys.
Yeah, lots of them. Yeah. So they conducted this audit, and what they found is out of the 72,000 mail-in ballots that were cast, 7% of all of the ballots, which comes out to almost 5,000 ballots, which is significant in a small county, had some sort of irregularity to them. So in this case, these were ballots that were either had matching signatures on them. There was one case where an entire nursing home contained ballots with the exact same signature on them. There were ballots that came back that were missing envelopes. They were just ballots that arrived with no envelope attached to them. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And there was another case, I believe, where, there were no postmark dates. Signatures weren't checked. And potentially, some of these ballots were actually double counted. So not only do we have 7%, that there was an issue, there's a potential that some of them were double counted. So we could be looking at something, closer to 10,000 votes that are messed up. And the issue with this, in this case, is there's a lot of local House districts in Missoula County for the state House representatives where seats were won by less than 1,000 votes. And so we're talking seats won by 400 votes in a county where there were almost 5,000 ballots. that had issues with them. And
Yeah.
so you start to question, well, how many of those votes in this district were not accurate? And again, just to remind you, this has absolutely nothing to do with voting machines doing anything wrong or election people doing anything wrong. This is just purely a result of mail-in ballot issues.
Yeah.
And one thing that's really alarming is they confronted one of the election administrators about this in Missoula County, who was a Democrat, and they sealed off all the ballots. They stopped letting them investigate them.
Of course.
They refused to release any video recordings of when the ballots were counted, refused to let them take photos or videos of the ballots. And the election administrator reportedly looked terrified and fearful and scared, a pretty guilty look when confronted about the results of this audit. And the other key thing, so let me get to one more thing, is this is really representative of some of the things we've seen in other larger metropolitan areas, like Fulton County in Georgia and some of the other large areas where there's been questions about the 2020 election. And again, I just want to remind you, we are not talking about vote switching or anything like that. This is just purely mail-in ballots. And by the way, Democrats want to pass H.R. 1, which would codify a lot of these things that led to what we're seeing in Missoula County, Montana. So, I just want to ask you guys, does this alarm you? Do you think stuff like this is a threat to our republic, to our future elections?
It absolutely is. And you have Democrats just actively fighting against any measures that would simply kind of shore up these processes and make things safer, like the Georgia election bill that just passed. They're fighting against it tooth and nail. And all it does is require voter ID. It doesn't allow line warming, which is essentially so. A lot of people have been complaining about this bill over line warming. Let me just explain that for one sec. So line warming is like when volunteers come out and they offer food or drinks to people waiting in long lines. And so people saw that was banned in the bill, and they're like, "Oh, how inhumane!" As if people waiting in line couldn't, drink and go to the bathroom and
Such a
just
lie.
eat food before. But also, oftentimes those people use that opportunity to get in and try to convince those people to vote the other way. So that's wrong, and it's good that that's banned, and it's good to have voter ID for all this mail-in ballot stuff. I mean, it's so complicated, this process, and you're having ballots sent to places nobody's home, nobody's lives there, and anybody could just pick up those ballots. And so just we need more voter ID. We need to preserve our election processes, and universal mail-in is doing the exact opposite. So,
sometimes I just want to, grab a Democrat, shake him, and
I
be like,
know.
why'd you have to make things so complicated? I think the biggest takeaway from me for just this whole story is the prevailing narrative that the left likes to peddle, that there was no election fraud. And like you said, Joey, I don't think, I'm not sure what, the exact nefariousness of hijacking an election. We don't know the extent of it, or if there is any extent.
Right.
But that being said, the left likes to take a story like this and be like, oh, it's just, Missoula County. Like that's all it is. Like it's a nothing burger. Yes, there was irregularities there, but it's a nothing burger. When in fact, this should, if anything, be the opposite. It's sort of like, if it can happen here, it can happen anywhere. What's the harm in looking into this to make sure that we avoid similar issues in 2024 or 2022 actually and beyond?
And there's an important distinction to make here between, whenever someone says fraud, the Democrats immediately paint it as, oh, they're a conspiracy theorists that are that person's claiming that there was widespread election altering voter fraud. There wasn't. I mean, there's no evidence we have that there was that. But we do know if a bunch of ballots are just being sent to random places unsolicited, that opens things up to individualized fraud in all kinds of different situations and places. And so that could have had a big effect in a lot of areas.
It is one of those things where, you'd think that in a republic or in a ostensibly a democratic republic like America, there'd be a better system to sending these mail ballots out as opposed, Because essentially what Democrats are doing is just throwing spaghetti at the wall and
Yes.
seeing what sticks.
Pretty much.
With the way they're just sending out all these ballots completely unsolicited. And, you know, man, that it boggles the mind that Democrats, leftists, they don't see the dangers of that. Which is ironic, given they spent 4 years crying that Trump stole an election,
exactly.
You know?
Russia.
Yeah, Russia.
Yeah, you know, there's another thing. I think you guys made fantastic points in this. I think one thing we could do is stop using the term fraud so much and using that term irregularities.
Yeah.
Because that's really what they are.
Yeah.
This isn't mass fraud. You know, like you said, it's individual. This is just single people taking advantage of the election laws that were changed going into the 2020 election, and you know, I guess they're committing fraud, you know, if you're filling out signatures, but it's not this orchestrated fraud like people are saying. It's irregularities on a large level, certainly.
Yeah.
And you know, like in this case, this I imagine could happen nationwide. So Montana, before the 2020 election happened, passed a law that banned ballot harvesting.
Yeah.
So you know, you couldn't go to someone's house, like an old person, and try to take their ballot, help them fill it out, and go turn it in. It's banned, which is smart because old people are constantly prey of ballot harvesters. Well, a court ruled that law illegal before the election. And then we read in here nursing homes where every ballot coming out of a nursing home has, and this has been forensically audited, signature experts have said all those signatures were signed by the same person. You know, how many nursing homes could have that happened to across America? And so, you know, do you guys think, you know, just based on all the questions that there are, that a audit is warranted in all of these large metropolitan areas? Because again, Missoula is not a large metropolitan area. This is just essentially a small town in Montana, and this is happening. Imagine what could have happened in the large metropolitan areas. Is an audit warranted in these places?
Yes. And really, even if there hadn't been any irregularities, I think auditing something as significant as an election, that's probably just best practice.
Yeah,
you
right.
know?
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
It's literally, we are literally electing one of, if not the most important elected official
Absolutely.
in the country,
Yeah.
in America. Maybe someone should double check everything.
Yeah,
You know,
I know.
like-
Why is that so controversial, right?
Yeah, it makes no sense when you see all these people that are like, "Oh no, we shouldn't do any audits. We don't. How dare you question the
Right.
election?" It's like, well, an audit's not going to hurt anybody. It's not going to
as long as there's nothing shady
Right.
going
As
on.
long as it makes
Yeah.
them look guilty.
Yeah.
like if you truly believe there was nothing wrong with the election, you should
Yeah.
welcome an audit.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And, you know, I think conservative messaging has been really messed up on this since the election happened. You know, Trump jumped right towards, you know,
Massive
voting
fraud.
machines are switching, and
Half,
they
yeah.
brought in ballots in the middle of the night and all this stuff. When we should have been going after the mail-in ballot stuff from the beginning.
Yes.
And we should have just said, let's audit the results. Instead, we sidetracked, and now we're, you know, how many months after the election? 5 months. And now we're just getting audits in these places. I think we really missed an opportunity. And I think you're right. You know, this is the most important election in America. What's so controversial about saying
Double
let's,
check the
let's
math.
have an audit?
Yeah, double check
just-
the math.
Let's double
Once
check.
over.
Let's
Just-
just
yeah,
be sure. And you know, the left have told us, you know, you're wrong. You're a
Yeah.
conspiracy theorist. And
You're
it's just
Q.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
you're
Q.
Q.
You're Q. If you dare question, you want
Yeah.
an audit? Oh, you're Q. Yeah, and you know, and that's what the messaging has been, especially since the Capitol riot. You know, we're all domestic terrorists who hate
Yep.
America and want to overturn the election. And really, all we want as conservatives, this is what every American should want, is confidence in our elections, because that was lost in 2020, no matter what.
Yeah, I will. There is a cynic in me that believes. So, to be clear, I think an audit should be done, period. Like I
Right.
said, just best practice.
Yeah,
in
I think
general.
that's a great point. Yeah.
But just to kind of play counter argument, I can see Democrats and the left arguing that, you know, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's sort of like, even if the audit finds absolutely nothing, you know, a completely negligible amount of irregularity,
Yeah.
there will absolutely be a bastion of conservatism that just won't buy
Yeah.
it. Like they
Yeah,
won't
that's
accept it.
a great point.
You know,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
do. So I do wonder
That's a good
if when something as emotionally heated and hotly contested as the 2020 election, you know, maybe we do need to go further. I don't know what the next step. You know, maybe we triple check it. You know,
Yeah.
but it does feel as if the Democrats are, I think, actually really missing an opportunity. You know, if I were running their PR, I would be, let's do it. Let's do the audit. Let's find that nothing weird happened. And then we put the pressure on the conservatives who are saying that something happened. But when Democrats just deny any sort of audit, I think they are actually dropping the ball on this.
I think so too. Like I said, it makes them look guilty of something. They might not be guilty of anything.
Yep.
But it looks like it when you were just so against something, and you're not admitting that conservatives are right by agreeing to the audit. You're simply agreeing, look, there's a large percentage of Americans who think things weren't right in this election. We have a duty in this country, I think our leaders have a duty to try to reinstill that confidence in our elections. So, the 2020 election was a disaster. Let's hope it doesn't happen again. The 2020 election gave us our dear president, Emperor Joe Biden.
Emperor.
Yeah, I love calling him that.
Joe.
Sleepy Joe. Quid pro Joe.
Quid pro Joe.
Brian, what's Biden up to lately?
I'll tell you what he's not been up to lately. He has not been appealing himself to the American public. So I don't think it's any secret that. So hold on. Let me take a step back. Joey, in regards to your topic, for the sake of my topic, let's assume all the audits happened. There was nothing shady going on.
Yeah.
If Biden did win the 2020 election on the up and up, he still got a huge heaping of help from the media.
Yeah.
I
so true.
legitimately can't remember the last. Well, actually, it was probably Obama, but even Obama, I thought, say what you will about the guy, even he, I thought, dealt with a little more scrutiny from the media than Biden did. Like, it feels like Biden is being handled with kid gloves.
I mean, they tried their best with Hillary.
True. Yeah.
Saw what could have been.
So, given that the media has been helping Biden out, you'd think, oh, hey, he must have a pretty decent approval rating.
Right.
Yeah.
Just about, it's 2 months into his presidency, essentially.
Yeah.
The first, 8 weeks or so. That has not been the case. You
don't say.
Yeah. There was a poll released yesterday, Tuesday, by NPR and Marist. I think I'm saying that right. Marist. And they actually did find that Biden is he actually does get some high marks from whoever was polled here, including things like a 65% approval rating on how he's handling the coronavirus. That seems wrong, but
that's
what have you.
51%
approval rating on Biden's handling of the economy, which again is sure.
Okay.
But when it comes to Biden's handling of the immigration crisis at the southern border, Biden is pulling in at a mere 34% approval.
Wow, that's
not
brutal.
good.
So people are not too thrilled with what Biden's done at the border in the infancy of his presidency. But yeah, I wanted to talk about this because it blew my mind that when you have the mainstream media going to bat, telling you, "Oh, there's no real crisis at the southern border.
Right.
This is all
Don't call it a crisis."
Yeah, this is a right-wing manufactured outrage. People aren't buying it. People genuinely think that the crisis at the border is an issue of Biden's making, and frankly, it is. And this is all to say, overall approval rating, Biden clocked in at a robust 52%. For frame of reference, Trump at this same point, same poll in his presidency, I think was trending at about 43% approval rating, which, the Trump one makes sense.
Yeah.
The media breathlessly attacked the former president. It was, you could probably count the number of positive, glowing news pieces written by left-wing media about Trump. You could probably
No
count
joke.
that on one pinky.
Not, well, there it is.
Yeah, not even your hand. It is insane, and yet Biden is still struggling with this.
Brian, this is probably heavily sampled to
Yes.
the left, right?
Yeah, it's
So
NPR.
so there's probably more liberals sampled than conservatives,
Yep.
and his approval rating on the border is that low.
At 34,
even
yep.
with the lean towards
Yep.
the left.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, if this had been some, informal poll conducted on, Breitbart or Fox News
Yeah.
where the audience is going to lean more right,
Yeah.
maybe take it with a grain of salt. Nope, this is NPR, which
Wow.
is, historically left-leaning.
That's pretty
maybe
stunning.
not
Yeah.
historically, but
They've gotten worse over the
yes,
last.
Yeah.
NPR is
definitely,
definitely
yes.
left-leaning
Yeah.
these days. So the first thing I wanted to ask you guys, given Biden's low approval rating when it comes to how he's handling the border, do you guys think Americans are finally almost getting desensitized to the mainstream media? Because, like I said, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, what have you, they are all covering the issue at the border with the lens that, this is not Biden's fault. This, people who blame Biden, they're, right-wing nut jobs.
Yeah.
So yeah, Mike, do you think Americans are finally starting to wise up to this mainstream media propaganda?
Definitely. I mean, I don't have any of the numbers on me, but the public's trust in the media has plummeted over the last during Trump's presidency is when, he kind of, a lot of people don't like to give him credit for this, but he really revealed how insidious they really are.
Yeah.
And you also see it with kind of the move to new media, and like you have YouTube channels
Yeah.
and YouTube shows that are made by one person that are getting more views than a lot of the top shows on network. So yeah, people are wisening up, and it's just going to continue to trend in this direction. I mean, there's nothing that's going to stop that.
I agree completely. I think part of the mainstream media's issue is they brand themselves as mainstream media as non-biased, but then you read it and it's not. It's
Yeah.
left-wing propaganda. Like, that's fine if that's what you want to cover.
Yeah.
Cover
Yeah.
it and admit it. Like, we're conservative media. We don't try to hide our bias. We have values and beliefs and a worldview as a media company, and that's what our audience likes, and that's why our audience trusts us and reads us. And they don't read or mainstream media because they can't trust what they're going to report. And so I think that's a big issue, and part of the reason their approval rating is so low. And you see the rise in independent
Yeah.
journalists,
Yep. Yeah.
people on Twitter going out and doing things and investigating on their own. We saw a lot of that during Antifa riots this past year, different things, just people being there on the ground, because you can build trust with people who admit who they are and their values align with you more than mainstream media that feel like liars.
And I have several anecdotal examples where I know of moderate and liberal friends of mine that will openly admit now that CNN and MSNBC, well, those are the left-wing
Yeah.
outlets, and so I go there for kind of the left-wing perspective. And it's oh, no one would have said that
No
I don't
way.
know, 15, 20 years ago. No one in those
Yeah.
groups, at least.
Totally.
So
Yeah, and another thing, which, by the way, guys, if you get a chance, go to westernjournal.com. Make sure you read this article about Biden's kind of poll issues. It's written by one of our writers/editors, Joe Saunders. He's incredible.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Cannot recommend reading this article enough.
Yep.
And Joe actually brings up several really good points, salient points that I want to rehash real quick. So the two areas where Biden has kind of, I guess, graded the highest is, according to these polls, is his dealing with the economy and the coronavirus. And, Saunders astutely points out, when it comes to the economy, that was largely established by Trump.
Yes.
Biden inherited everything,
Yeah.
even if, whether you love or hate Trump, the good and the bad, Biden inherited it. I think that's
Absolutely.
inarguable.
yeah.
Right.
So again, Biden's getting high marks in the economy. He's basically taking someone else's credit.
Yeah.
Yes.
And same thing with the coronavirus.
Oh, yeah.
His handling of the coronavirus. I'm pretty sure Operation Warp Speed began under the Trump administration.
Yeah.
And honestly, what's the difference between the coronavirus now and a year ago? We have vaccines.
That's
and
it.
that's
Yeah.
Trump. And yet
Yeah.
Biden's
Yes.
handling this so well.
Trump was hitting Biden's daily goal for vaccines used before Biden got into
Yeah.
office. So,
Well, and Biden has the whole, under-promising thing. He
Yeah.
had, 100 million vaccinations within... Either way, that
Yeah.
number was less than what Trump was
Yeah,
already
yes,
doing.
yeah.
He's just
Yeah.
under-promising.
He's trying to make himself. He's setting himself up to look good. Yeah.
So Joey, I want to kick to you real quick. So given Biden basically kind of stealing credit, do you think this is a I guess sort of a winning strategy for the left, for the media, for Biden? Do you think this will work? Do you think this can rehabilitate his image? Because clearly, as misinformed as some of these people may be, Biden is getting positive credit for things like the economy and coronavirus, which arguably are the two biggest issues today.
I think this is going to backfire on Biden. So, right now, the economy is still recovering. We still have Trump's tax cuts, which spurred...
For now.
Exactly. That's exactly why it's going to backfire. It has spurred economic growth. Joe Biden is in Pittsburgh today announcing his, I think it's up to $4 trillion now, his infrastructure package. Just an absurd amount of money in the first 100 days of his presidency that he wants to spend. Insanity. I mean, it rivals like Great Society, types of legislation. But anyways, Joe Biden wants to raise the corporate tax rate. He wants to raise the personal income tax. Pete Buttigieg is talking about taxing people per mile they drive, which affects the poorest Americans the most. The rich people don't care. It's the poor people. I drive 20 miles to work every day. I'm not driving to work anymore if that gets passed. This is going to backfire. So he has these great dreams about infrastructure. And I agree, infrastructure is an issue. But the solution is not to raise taxes on the people who can least afford it and on companies that you need to spur economic growth. So I predict that poll number, if these tax cuts pass, is going to change dramatically.
I'll be very interested to see these numbers.
And the COVID thing, conservatives need to do a better job messaging. Biden lied about the vaccine program. He said he didn't inherit one. He did from Trump. And he took credit for the goals that Trump already met. Trump got a COVID vaccine produced in less than a year, which is a record. No one said he could do it, and he did. And I think this is going to backfire.
Yeah,
and
I do think Operation Warp Speed sounds like something a third grader would
name. Yeah,
but it worked.
It worked.
And Trump did it.
Yes, he did.
And to go off on your point about the taxes, it is hilarious to think about how just a few months ago there were so many liberals that were just vehemently saying, "Oh, Biden's not going to raise your taxes." They're all lying to you.
We promise.
He's just taxing the rich. It's not going to
just the rich.
So
it is crazy how people. I mean, they were sold a bill of goods, and they bought it
every time,
and
they keep buying it.
And it's just it's one of those things where I would love to see some big changes happen soon, like as far as transparency, accountability. To be fair, I do think that conservative media, was a little bit of a mixed bag when it came to covering Trump. I do think, when it came to actually criticizing the former president, conservative media didn't always do a very good job with that. But that is nothing compared to, these are lies. The things being, the way Biden is getting lauded, they are lies.
Right. Something, too, that we were lied to, and conservative media did a good job covering this. We were sold that Joe Biden was just moderate Joe. He was just
a moderate Democrat.
He's just the moderate Democrat. He's just good old Joe that you've known for 48 years. And it was a lie. Think about Bernie Sanders right now. Bernie Sanders gets to sit back and relax thinking, wow, everything I want is getting implemented, and I didn't even have to become president. And, at this point, Tucker Carlson made a great point yesterday. He said, at this point, I'd rather have Bernie Sanders as president because he'd have the same policies as Biden, but at least you would know the guy is honest.
It's 1,000% true.
He has been completely honest. You know where he stands. I don't agree with anything, but you know what you're getting. With Biden, it's lies, and you don't know the next thing that's going to happen or that he's going to switch on.
And we don't know the next thing that's going to happen.
No, we don't.
These poll numbers. Very curious to see. I'm, assuming that the showrunners here don't fire me. I would love to come back on and look at these numbers again eventually. But so that's in the future. That's what Biden could or could not do. Biden and his administration have already done quite a bit, especially when it comes to letting kind of the left run amok with their CRT, critical race theory, and things of that nature.
All of this they're called the critical social theories, all this social justice mumbo jumbo and stuff that keeps getting pushed. And we put out an article yesterday basically talking about how the fact that public schools, universities, federal agencies, the military, like all these institutions are teaching critical race theory. They're teaching like stuff about gender theory, about how you can choose your own gender. With the and it's all like all of this is religion.
Yeah.
It's not based on fact. It's based on it's a faith-based system that's teaching subjective moral values.
Yes.
And you know, the one big problem with this is that what the left likes to say is if it wasn't for Christianity, if it wasn't for Judaism, if it wasn't for all the religions, we would be able to advance to a society that's utopic. We'd be we would have heaven on earth, if you will. And the problem with that is when you move to a secular society, we saw it with the USSR, we saw it with China, whenever you move to a secular society, rationality doesn't rule people's minds. Like they are always looking for something to believe in, something to aspire to, and they need an underlying system of morals to follow. And so once you destroy things like Christianity, you end up just creating your own. And we've seen that with critical race theory, gender theory, and you know, the article we put out yesterday basically talked about how, you know, when these institutions teach these things, they're violating the First Amendment's Establishment Clause, which says the government cannot establish or promote a religion.
That's a fantastic.
Yeah, it's funny because you know, atheists have long used that Establishment Clause to kind of attack prayer in school and stuff, and now, you know, a lot of Christians didn't like it. But now a lot of them, and including me and a lot of others, are realizing, oh, there's real value to this right. Because, you know, the government's going to want to push all sorts of stuff like this. And, you know, with critical race theory, you know, they're teaching things like systemic racism, which there's no way to prove or unprove. It's just kind of this ethereal force that creates disparate outcomes, I guess. And then they're teaching things about gender identity. And we have a tweet from this evolutionary biologist who basically is explaining why gender identity is so basically just a religious framework. So the notion that we all have a gender identity is a religious framework. It's not an empirical fact, but rather an ideological stance. I don't have a gender identity. I simply acknowledge that I'm male and I express myself according to my own individual personality. I am not cis. And that was Colin Wright. So he's
oh my.
He writes for Quillette, which is like a centrist organization all about free speech. Yeah. But so the one thing I wanted to get at with you guys is that all of these, the fact that the left is pushing this is their new religion. Social justice is the left's religion. And they're trying to push it through the government, and it looks like we're going to be able to fend that off using the First Amendment and invoking our First Amendment rights. But they're going to continue to push it, you know, socially in all kinds of groups where, you know, that First Amendment Establishment Clause does not apply. And so, you know, what do you guys think this stuff qualifies as a religion? Because, you know, there is a lot of disagreement over what the definition of a religion is. And then, you know, secondly, how do we fight against this stuff, like in society?
I do think it's a religion. I think the issue that we're running into is the government and the institutions that run our schools and other aspects of our life have become the so-called church.
Yes.
And so, you know, if the government in this case is the church, essentially to them, how do you make an argument? Because they're the ones running it. I mean, how do we fight it if they control it? So I do think it's a religion. The government is pushing it. The education systems are pushing it and imposing it on the youngest minds in America. Like I said,
and the one point about that, like with like these like, you know, the countries that I mentioned, like, you know, like the Soviets, like that move away from religion and they ban religion and they try to become secular, is that God turns into the government. The government becomes their God.
That's exactly
because they see the government as this all-powerful force that can bring about kind of the heaven on earth, the utopia, the end of suffering.
Yeah, I think the example that hits closest to home for me is just looking at Korea. Look at the way South Korea is it's I don't want to say westernized, but it is, you know, Christianity is the biggest religion in South Korea. That is a Christian, like, kind of ideologically based society.
Yes.
North Korea is the exact opposite. And, you know, just in case you don't know anything about, Korea. North Korea is a bit of a dumpster fire, and it's just a poorly run dictatorship. And yeah, it is. There is something when you try to. So I think a fundamental part of faith and religion, in specific regards to Christians, is that they are doctrines based on the Word of God.
Yeah.
The left's kind of twisting of religion, they are doctrines based on the word of man. And that is...
Wow. Yeah, that's a great point.
That is something... That's something that we've been headed towards for a while. It's something I've kind of been personally worried about. And yeah, it's just one of those things where, the left sees themselves as God.
Yeah.
And the kind of the point of no return for this is that, you can't have Western society without Christianity. Like, the idea that every person has inherent worth because they're made in the image of God, there is no way you can get there with just human rationality. Like, you need the Bible to get to that conclusion. Outside of that, every individual is just seen as a collection of cells that has, you're better at certain things and worse at others, and, more intelligent people, stronger people. Those would be, according to human rationality, those people would be more inherently valuable than people that don't have those things, than people with disabilities. And so, I think the one way that we can really push against this, first, we need to get it out of the government. We can't have the government pushing this stuff. But second, we need to hammer that point home, and we need to be, Christianity is really a big answer here. And a lot of people have been talking about how we need like a third great, I think it would be the third great awakening. I'm not sure. Might be fourth, but we need another great awakening.
Absolutely.
We need to bring Christianity back in a big way. That would probably be one of the best ways we could kind of combat this.
I saw a poll, I think it was yesterday, that less than 50% of Americans now identify themselves as part of a church. Or is it just a religion?
I think it's religion because I think I saw like
just any
mosques.
religion?
Yeah,
Okay,
mosques and temple were part of the.
So you think
graph.
that means an even smaller percentage identify themselves as Christians.
Yeah.
And I think that is an example of what has led us down the road to losing the moral society that America was founded on, the Christian beliefs that America was founded on. We have become a perverted society.
Yeah.
Where we allow things like transgenderism and critical race theory to run amok. And it is fundamentally because a loss of Christian faith in America.
And we crave religion. We crave spirituality.
Right.
And like, if you just look at, it's funny, when I wrote this article about kind of the First Amendment Established Clause and stuff, I read this essay from James Lindsay. He's a big CRT critic. And he walked through kind of the parallels between the religious system of CRT and the religious system of Christianity. And it's like, they're just trying to copy us without Jesus, basically. So it's,
it's stunning.
Followers are taught they must atone for their sins, which would be identity privileges.
That makes sense.
And
Oh,
those
my
sins,
goodness.
those sins were born out of the fall, which would be historical injustices against minority groups.
That's fascinating.
So,
Atonement, there's two more things. Atonement for those followers can come through confession, which would be acknowledging one's privilege, and good works, which would be adopting social justice causes.
So like, white privilege then is like acknowledging your sins as being a white person. Then,
Yeah.
essentially.
Glad I don't have
Wow,
to do
that is
Yeah.
But that's stunning. I'd never thought of that before.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Wow.
And it's actually interesting. 'Cause earlier today, I was actually reading about. Have you guys ever heard of Pascal's wager?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was reading about that, and it just kind of caught my eye, especially when we started talking about this. So for those that don't know, Pascal's wager is essentially it's a philosophical theory that rational people will seek religion or seek faith, God specifically.
Yes.
So Pascal was a French philosopher from back before I was born, so it doesn't really matter. But essentially, I mean, it boils down to the idea that, and this is Pascal's line of thinking, is that so at the end of the day, there either is a God or there isn't. People of faith have, and Pascal basically argued that rational people should believe in God because without God, you are limited to a very finite, existence. You'll be happy here and there, but largely it's just you lose things. Time, life, what have you. As opposed to people who do believe in God, eternal salvation. That is so. Given that, maybe that made me think. That actually does explain why the left is treating their thought as religion, because they realized the people who believed in God in Pascal's wager, they had it right. They had the good life.
Yeah.
They were doing good.
Yeah.
And the left is like, well, we still, no, God doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But we kind of need him too,
Yeah.
and that. So I'm not really going anywhere with this. It's just it made me think of that.
We all worship a God. It's just we're not always conscious of what that God is.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
for them, social justice, the government, all these things, that is their God. And you can see that, the way that a lot of Christians get fired up about preaching the gospel. A lot of these leftists will get really fired up about preaching social justice causes.
So true.
And that's where they get the meaning in their life. That's how
Yeah.
they know they're a good moral person.
Well, we are all good moral people here. However, we are running out of time, so we want to thank you so much for watching today's episode of WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. You can catch us Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. However, quick programming note, in observance of Good Friday, this coming Friday, there will not be a new episode of WJ Live on Fridays, so this will be the last show until next week. Don't miss an episode of WJ Live. You can go to westernjournal.com/newsletters. When you go there, you'll be given a bunch of options. You can pick the one specifically for WJ Live. That way you will be emailed and notified as soon as there's new content, good content. westernjournal.com/newsletters. Make sure you sign up for WJ Live. You can also do us a huge favor. If you're watching us on YouTube, please go to your favorite audio subscriber, whether it's Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, however you like to listen to your podcasts. Go there. Make sure you subscribe to WJ Live. And if you could do us a huge favor, leave us a 5-star review on whatever your platform of preference is. That would do us a huge, huge favor. And if you are already listening to us via audio on your preferred podcast network, come join us on YouTube. You can go to youtube.com/WJ Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button as well as the bell. That way you will be notified as soon as a new episode goes live. Don't want to miss any of this. And finally, if you'd like to support real journalism, you can do us one last huge favor by going to westernjournal.com/join. And you can subscribe directly to us. You get a more focused experience on our site. And it also helps us out, which is much appreciated. So once again, there will be no new episode Friday. We will see all you on Monday. And yes, for those wondering, all three of us are Avril Lavigne fans.
Hey, you. I said it.
Which is essentially a world fair.
Time to go.
And she was also historic.
Oh, they got an audio version too.
And she was also historic for being the first kind of living trademark of the advertising world.